Secretary of State Marco Rubio met with Russian Foreign Prime Minister Sergei Lavrov in Riyadh earlier today to begin high-stakes negotiations to try and end the war in Ukraine. Absent from the talks was any representative for Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that his country will not accept any results from talks that Kyiv does not participate in. The meeting is also an effort to thaw the years-long chill between the two superpowers. Already, both sides have agreed to restore embassy staffing after years without it. Scripps News White House correspondent Serena Marshall joins me now in our D.C. newsroom. And Serena, any other headlines so far out of the sit-down?
Yeah, Andrew, this sit-down lasted nearly 5 hours, and really more than anything, the result is they're going to have more talks. And it seems it was more about restoring the relationships between the United States and Russia than even it was about ending the ongoing battle between Russia and Ukraine. Now, there were 4 areas of mutual agreement as part of this the final result of these talks. That was to the new embassy staffing, as you mentioned, also establish a consultation mechanism to address irritants to the bilateral relationship, appoint respective high-level teams to begin working on a path to ending the conflict in Ukraine, and lay the groundwork for future cooperation on matters of mutual geopolitical interest. They hope to emerge from a successful end of the conflict, and parties of today's meeting pledged to remain engaged and make sure the process moves forward in a timely and productive manner. But it wasn't just Ukraine that was absent from these talks. Any member of the European Union was also absent from the table. Now, Secretary of State Marco Rubio did say that they would need to come to the table at some point given sanctions that currently exist by EU members on Russia. He also argued that leaving Ukraine out of the talks, it wasn't them being sidelined, it was just because this needed to happen first.
For 3.5 years while this conflict has raged, or 3 years while it's raged, no one else has been able to bring something together like what we saw today, because Donald Trump is the only leader in the world that can. So no one is being sidelined here. But President Trump is in a position that he campaigned on to initiate a process that could bring about an end to this conflict. And from that could emerge some very positive things for the United States, for Europe, for Ukraine, for the world. But first it begins by the end of this conflict. And so the only thing President Trump's trying to do is bring about peace.
Now, Zelensky did emphasize he's not accepting any outcome from these talks. It didn't seem any of the points that were agreed upon would impact Ukraine in the immediate future, given they were really just talks to continue talking. But he also did postpone his own planned travel to Saudi Arabia. That was to sign economic agreements with partners in the region, but he said he's going to postpone it because he didn't want to be seen as participating in any way in these negotiations. Now, Russia, for their part, did put out some demands following this meeting. They said that they want NATO to cancel the 2008 promise of Ukraine membership as a NATO nation. They also wanted to object to any stationing of NATO member forces in Ukraine, which would go as a part of a security guarantee as some of the negotiations to stop the fighting. But really, this emphasized an about-face, Andrew, of U.S. Russia relations. Keep in mind, Russia is still heavily sanctioned by America. They had new sanctions go into effect right before President Trump was inaugurated January 10th on oil. Those remain in effect. In fact, the high-level Russian diplomat that was present currently remains sanctioned by the U.S. Treasury. Andrew?
Yeah. And these Riyadh talks, not only an about-face with the U.S. Russia relations, but also U.S. Ukraine, totally different than how the Biden administration approached these negotiations. What are some of the concerns we've heard, not only from the Ukrainians, but other allies across the world about these bilateral talks just between the U.S. and Russia?
Well, they're concerned that they're not at the table and that they need to be. As I mentioned, the EU has sanctioned Russia, just like the United States has. But as more than anything, they can't get to an end in fighting without the partners in the region who are backing Ukraine, supporting them, funding them in many ways, being at that negotiating table. Now, Russia is saying that they refuse to have any kind of a security force present in the Ukraine region at the end of these as part of concern the European Union members will have over this. Also, refusing NATO membership is another big concern. And, you know, whether or not Ukraine will continue to get funding from those partners as these talks continue will be something many eyes throughout Europe will be on.
All right, Scripps News White House correspondent Serena Marshall for us.